I'm Jim Mundorf. This is Lonesome Lands podcast. Today we're talking to Shad Sullivan, who's a Lonesome Lands contributor. He's written a number of things on the website, and he's also been doing recently, he's been on Fox News a number of times talking about the cattle industry. And this podcast is brought to you by lonesomelands.com. If you go there, click on subscribe at the top of the page, there's a number of ways that you can support what I'm doing here and help me to keep this thing going. There's also a merchandise page on the website, lonesomelands.com. Click on merch and you can buy a few different things on there, and that helps too. If you'd like to advertise, I'm working on an advertising page on there, but you can email jim@lonesomelands.com and that will get to me if you're interested in advertising. The podcast is up on YouTube, and you can also listen on Apple and Spotify and some other different outlets, I believe, where podcasts are. Here is Shad Sullivan. So Shad Sullivan, what I was going to call you was you are the Fox, you're the cattle industry correspondent for Fox News, right? Is that your official title now?
No, my official title is American Cattle Rancher.
Right. So there you go. What do you do? That was my first question on here. What do you do?
I am an American cattle rancher. I make my living with cattle. We take pride in that.
Yeah. And you're in Olney, Texas?
We're in Olney, Texas. We're headquartered out of southeast Colorado, a little town called Olney Springs, Colorado, north of there, about 20 miles. Been there a long, long time. My family, both sides of my family homesteaded there. One in 1899 and one in 1914. And we've been there ever since, although it's kind of the high desert. It's very dry, and we get about 9 to 11 inches of precipitation a year. But it's really good grass country, and it's short grass country. But if we get rain in the proper increments, it is a lot of fuel for cattle growth. And so we're stalker people, which means we are the middle segment of the industry, right beyond the cow-calf producer. And so we buy calves mainly and grow those calves from a certain weight, say 300 to 350 pounds, up to 850 to 900 pounds. And we utilize a wheat grazing program in North Texas, and then we finish those cattle on our ranches in Colorado, where we utilize that short grass country to put on weight through the summer, and then we sell those cattle in the fall. And that has been our program since really 1959. My dad turned his program over to stalkers and yearlings, and that's been our program specifically since then. Our Texas wheat program, we implemented that in 1992, the fall of 1992, just because the winters in Colorado were getting so bad, and it was hard to, the cost of production had gone up, and we felt like, the transportation of those light calves was getting too far. He had a program that was based out of Mississippi, and so he decided, we needed to make some changes, and that's what we did, and that's what led us to North Texas, Archer County, North Texas, in 1992. And it has been our program ever since, just to grow that calf on wheat, and then take him to Colorado. So it's pretty simple. It's not unusual. There's a lot of people that do it. I guess what made ours unusual is that we didn't hire any of that done. We always stayed with the cattle wherever they were. We'd had a couple of wrecks in the late 80s and early 90s on some winter programs that we had just tested out. And so that's why we always stayed with the cattle. But it's a unique operation, and really it is consistent. I mean, it has worked for us consistently. It doesn't mean that we didn't have a lot of struggle. We had a lot of struggle, a lot of learning curves, but over the years, it has treated us well. although I can see that is changing as well. So not everything stays the same forever. We have to change with the times, and we have to stay flexible is the word. And we
Right.
do.
Yeah. And for anybody that wants to know, like we did a video. I rode the sail barn a couple
Yep.
of years ago, 2-3 years ago now, with
Yeah.
Shad, and I put a video together about kind of explaining wheat pasture cattle and how your operation kind of works. I'll put that in the description. So now we know what you do. How does a guy like you running a bunch of cattle in North Texas end up on Fox News? Or I guess Glenn Beck. We should start there.
Yeah.
How did
Well,
you end up on Glenn Beck? And so for those who haven't heard or seen, Glenn Chad did a hour podcast or I don't even, did he call it a podcast or was it? I
yeah, it
just
was an
watched
in
it.
studio podcast. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. He was in studio in Dallas, right?
that's
Yeah.
right.
So how did you end up there?
Well, if I mean, for some of your listeners, they know that in 2020, when we all got that email from the USDA that said they were going to help disperse teams to help us with the marketing and if need be, the destruction our of our cattle herds because of the backup in the feed yards, because we weren't getting any cattle slaughtered. And so the cattle were backing up, harvest ready cattle, slaughter ready cattle were backing up like crazy. Nobody was working. And so they put out this email, and I knew that they were serious about it because we had already seen where they had destroyed our vegetable crops due to supply chain issues, our hogs, our poultry industry. And the only reason they hadn't started on the cattle industry was because of the nature of the cattle industry. It takes too long to reproduce. And so when we got that, I did that video, and it kind of set me the wrong way because we know that we had the longest food lines in history since the Great Depression. And at the very same week, we were going to import beef from Namibia for the very first time in history. And so all of that set wrong with me to say that we were going to help you euthanize the possibility of euthanization of your cattle herds. We're destroying our crops. The food lines are long, and we're importing beef from Namibia, where we are where they are very underregulated. And off the cusp, I just did a video that went viral, and I didn't know at the time.
Millions.
Yeah, I didn't
Millions
know
and
at the
millions.
time that it was going viral, and I didn't know at the time what viral meant, Jim. And so it did go crazy, and got millions and millions of views. And I believe to this day that video changed the outlook of the consumers and their food supply in the United States. Now, fast forward 4 years, and you look back and you're like, man, I wish that video disappeared, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And in the meantime, we were fighting the natural asset company issue through the New York Stock Exchange and the Securities Exchange Commission. And I wrote an op-ed on that issue, a private property rights issue. Well, in the same week that op-ed came out, my video from 2020 went viral again. And I have no idea what instigated that, but people were calling and texting, and it had got 3 or 4 million more views. And it was just odd that I wrote the op-ed and that video went viral the same week. Well, somehow that op-ed ended up on Glenn Beck's desk. And I was actually on another podcast with Representative Hagman out of Wyoming, and I got a beep on my phone, and I looked down, and it said Glenn Beck, and I thought, well, that's just scam. So I didn't really think about it for another day, and I thought, well, maybe I need to go look at that email, and I did, and sure enough, it was from Glenn Beck's person, and wanting me to explain a couple of questions. And I said, I can sure do that. And so I did. And she said, can tell me more about what you're fighting? And all of these issues. And I said, yes, I can. How do you want it, in a letter form or a story form? She said, just write Glenn a letter. And so I wrote him a 3-page letter, and I got a call back, and it was them. And they said, and this was like on Monday or Tuesday, and they said, can you be here Thursday? And I said, yeah, I can sure come down and visit. And I was excited about that. That I knew who Glenn Beck was, but I wasn't an avid and loyal follower, just because I don't have access to that kind of technology. And I'm in that age bracket where you're in between knowing a lot about it, technology, and following and podcasts and all that stuff. So I'm kind of on the line there. But anyway, they invited me down, and it was a great experience. We visited for an hour, and about all of these issues that matter, and they matter to me, and maybe they don't matter to a lot of people, but they do matter to me. And so I was really enthralled with him, and the whole experience was fantastic. But I couldn't really nail down why I was there. And so I finally asked, I said, why am I here? I mean, how did you know about me? And because I really figured it was that video from 2020
Mm-hmm.
that everybody just on board with. And he said, well, your natural asset op-ed got to my desk. And I was like, really? That it wasn't a video? And he's like, no. And they really didn't know anything about the video, or if they did, they didn't tell me. And it was my op-ed and my work in private property rights with RCAF USA that really got me there. And it was a great experience. I will not lie. I wish I could go back and talk to him more,
Right.
because I've been preaching, Jim, for a long time, that all of our issues are focused around liberty and freedom, and all of his issues are also focused around liberty and freedom. And so I could talk, at least I could talk to him all day. I'm not sure if he could talk to me all day. I probably bored him. I was very sick that day, had a terrible sinus infection, sore throat, and so I didn't sound very good, but it was a great experience overall.
Yeah, I thought you come off great, and everybody I've talked to that saw it, they loved it, and they were so thankful, kind of that it happened. I guess I should say too, you're a Lonesome Lands contributor, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
posted the op-ed, but yeah, I think you put it on. Did you put it out as a press release with RCAF?
yes, yeah,
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 so it went out as a press release through RCAF, which we
yeah.
should say you're not, you were on the board with RCAF, and now you're the property rights. What are you? Property rights?
That's correct. I sat on the board representing in the state of Texas for 6 years at RCAF USA, and I took over their committee chair in the property rights division 6 or 8 years ago. And so that's where I rolled off the board this year. So I'm no longer on the board of directors, but that was, again, a fantastic experience with incredible people who are like-minded and just real down to earth, true grassroots producers. I mean, the real deal. It's kind of like being an advocate is really popular right now. And it's really popular to say we're a grassroots organization, but RCAF USA truly is grassroots. We're very bottom level, self-funded, and those people are just producers that love the land and love watching their cattle grow and their sheep grow. And that was a great experience that I'll cherish forever.
Yeah. And they got young Glenn Beck with your op-ed. But really, your writing, probably you're a very good writer, and you could tell that you've spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I know you've done cowboy poetry and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. But I just
Honestly, Jim, writing is my one true gift from God. And I love to write. Um, and I love to write poetry. I've written poetry for 32 years. I don't ever put it out. I put it out a little bit out there, but as far as to go compete in poetry and writing contests and cowboy poetry stuff, I've never done that. And I'm not even sure how to do that, but just there's some sort of release in my soul, I guess, that when I write, it's like, I don't know, it's like building a house, right? You build this beautiful house and you go back and you look at it and you look at it, and I go back and I read my poetry. There's something about putting words together that gives me a sense of freedom and a sense of not really accomplishment, but of satisfaction. And so I do love to write. In fact, I think you published my very first article at Lonesome Lands quite a while back, and that's been a lot of fun. That's truly been a lot of fun. And hopefully someday I was just talking about it today. Hopefully someday I can, slow the cattle deal down where I can focus on, I'd like to write a couple books. I got some ideas, and I'd like to write a lot more poetry and get some poetry out there and some articles just surrounding the things that inspire me.
Well,
So,
it worked for you. So it got you to Glenn Beck. And then, so to move on from there, then how many times you've been on Fox News here? Like this year, I guess,
well, just since Glenn Beck, so in the last
which
10
was,
months, uh, 3 times, I guess, I'm not sure if it's 3 or 4. I've been on the evening news 3 times, and then I was on a Fox News podcast that came out yesterday with Lisa Booth, and so that was pretty exciting. But I mean, I've been on a lot of podcasts and gained some inadvertent recognition, and I don't know what to think about all that. I kind of feel like I've got a lot of support in the independent production area, but I also have gained probably some enemies. But the Lord, honestly, and let me back up for a second. I can tell you, looking back, that all of this was God ordained, because I really thought the Glenn Beck deal was because of the video, but it wasn't. It was because of that op-ed, which was a very strange situation for me. And so looking back, I can see that God wanted that to happen. And so I took that. And after that happened, and I had that interview with Glenn Beck on the Blaze, I said, all right, Lord, I'll walk through the valley, and I'll walk through the doors that you open. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. Just give me the wisdom and the word and the words to do it. And don't let me make an ass of myself or my peers or my industry, or for liberty and freedom, because that's ultimately what I'm fighting for. So that's how it evolved, and it's been a very strange dynamic, because I feel like, even though I do have a lot of support, I feel like I'm out in the wilderness by myself. And like, let's take, for example, the Glenn Beck podcast. Um, I'm on the Glenn Beck podcast, interviewed by Glenn Beck. 2 weeks later, he has Tucker Carlson on, who was his first interview from the Vladimir Putin interview. So you have that dynamic, which is strange. And then, like this podcast yesterday with Fox News, I said, well, I'm not sure. When she introduced herself, I said, I'm not sure who you are. And she says, well, if you're wondering, where I come from, my last 3 interviews have been Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and Ron DeSantis. And so me being in that,
yeah,
you
add your
know,
name on the list.
it's very weird. It's a very strange. And so I do feel like I'm in the wilderness, and I feel like God is protecting me, because I'm sure I've made a lot of enemies, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm standing for what I believe. And, I've talked to the matriarch of our outfit, which is my 76-year-old mother. And I said, they're coming, and they're coming after the land, and they're coming after our production rights. And all I'm really worried about is my 8-year-old son when I die. Right. And she said, Shad, if you don't stand now, there'll be no time later to stand. And
Right.
so that's why we're here.
Yeah. You keep saying enemies. Have you, I was curious, what's the response? Have you gotten, like, have you heard from a lot of people, or
Negatively?
yeah, have you gotten it? Well, either way, negative or positive.
Oh,
What's just the response been from
I've
all
heard
of this?
from, yeah, well, just in the last 2 months, I've heard from thousands of people positively. I've never heard anything negative ever. And I know it's out there because that's just the way of the beast, right?
Yeah.
But God, I'm telling you, God has protected me from all that. I've never seen any of it. Nobody has sent me any nasty messages. If they did, I haven't seen them. I mean, it's just
Well, that's
been,
kind of, I feel like, the way nasty people work. And I was seeing something this morning where it's like, and somebody, like, I put something on Twitter yesterday that got quite a bit of, I was kind of calling out NCBA and stuff, and somebody, the people get to talking underneath it with all the comments, and I kind of just stay out of it. But, and
yeah,
then somebody else was saying how, when they put up facts about climate change or different things, they're just called a denier, or they're called dumb, or you're denying the science.
yeah.
But nobody else, when they want to argue, they don't bring an argument. It's more personal.
No, well,
And
I think that the ability to argue is only for a few, right?
right.
To genuinely debate, that is only for a few. There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, and
know,
that's what makes it easy. And your stuff
yeah,
isn't really like online, more as it's not like you're posting it on social media or something like that. You're actually on TV. So,
yeah.
and so, like, how does that, do they just call you up like during the day and they're like, we're doing a segment on cattle and we
Yeah.
need you? And
That's,
then you just sat down, just like we are,
that's
like, is it a Zoom deal like what we're doing right now? Or
yeah, yeah, it is. Well, it was kind of the first time Fox News called. Um, I was actually in Denver at the Capitol. I was on the steps going into the Capitol building. I had a private property rights meeting up there in Denver. And I was going up the steps, and this New York number calls me, and I'm like, I better get this. So I got it, and it was uh, Fox News, the bottom line, Fox Business News, the bottom line. And they're like, can you be on at 5 o'clock tonight? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm in Denver. I got to drive 200 miles home, 150 miles home. Let me look. And so I told him no. I said, I can't do it. I can't get home fast enough. And he kind of went like that. And I said, well, call this guy. So I gave him another number to call, and he called at me immediately back. And he's like, that number's not working. Now, whether that was the truth or not, I don't know. But that for me, that was a click from the Lord that said, you're meant for this. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. Give me 2.5 hours. So I did. I got home and I got all set up, and we were actually counting down, and he was down to 3 seconds, and he just butts in and he goes, Shad, we have to cancel this because of breaking news in the Fannie Willis case. And I'd been following that a little bit, and I'm like, that's fine, no problem. He says, can you be on Monday? And so I said, no, no, I said, I can be on Monday if you guys can do it. And they said, no, we have to interview Donald Trump that day. And I'm like, okay, well, call back whenever you're ready. So they kind of ghosted me for a week, and I just kind of forgot about it. Well, then on Friday evening, or one of those evenings, I don't know when, it's all a blur now. They called 1 hour ahead of time, and they were like, can you be on at 5:30? And I'm like, yes. So we went ahead and did that. And then the Ingram angle was the next one to call. And that was pretty cool. I just did it in my mom's kitchen in Colorado, and they gave me about 2 hours to prepare is all. And I don't know, the last one, they gave me literally 30 minutes. And I just, now a couple of them have called me, uh, and they were both Fox News, and they're like, can you be on in the morning with Fox and Friends? And I said, yes. And they said, well, answer these two questions. I said, well, give me an hour. So I had to go type these answers up to these two questions. Well, then by then it was, they were like, we've changed it. And so we're going to go do something else. And then that's when they had that, John, somebody from West
oh,
Virginia.
right. Yeah.
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 So,
So
but it's been a great experience overall. I mean, I don't know what the Lord's preparing me for, and maybe nothing, but overall, I've enjoyed it. I love to talk, and so it's been interesting, and it's been, I think the key for me Jim, is if I can just be real, where people just be myself. I'm not trying to impress anybody. I just want to be me, and I want to be able to be relatable not only to my peers in the industry, but to our consumers. Our consumers are really, really important to us. And I want people to know that I love America and I'm America first guy. I make no apologies for it, but I want them to know that I'm one of them, right? That's what I am.
Yeah, and that's what I thought about when you're on Glenn Beck. I was like, thank goodness. Like, I feel like they picked the perfect guy, really, because you have
Well,
no apologies and you have absolutely no problem. You have no qualms with talking about, your pride in America and liberty, and you've talked about it for so long. You put it together really well.
well, I
And you're
appreciate
and you're
that.
the real deal. One of the things I've learned from you and the people I try to talk to is you talk about skin in the game, and you're the real deal because every year you're putting a ton of skin in the game, and you gotta just kind of work with what you got in
Well,
the cattle business. You're
you
not
know,
somebody that's making oil money, or you're not some spoiled kid or something. You're somebody
right.
that has to raise cattle and make money from cattle every year, and
And
that's what we
sometimes,
need.
well, and sometimes we get this advocacy deal that we talk about that's becoming really popular. A lot of that is just visual representation, right? People, they get on their beautiful handmade hats and they're perfectly creased, and they have all the up to date gear and saddle, and it's beautiful to me. I love that, but that's not what makes our industry roll. I mean, if I did tell Glenn Beck, I said, I can argue all of this because my family and me actually, the cattle did it. And we paid for the land, or we are paying for the land with the cattle. And it's not that I I'm hard on other people for other ways, but I have a different perspective. And my perspective is, number one, um, we did it with the cattle. It took a lot of hard work by all of us. I mean, every one of us in our family pitched in. My mom and dad didn't inherit anything, although they did buy my mom's ranch when they were very young. And the 80s came along and it was hard. They lost a lot of land in the 80s. That was hard on my dad. Us kids experienced that. But we saddled up. By the time we were 3 years old, we were on a horse and we were doing it. And maybe we didn't look like we were Texas style or all that,
Mhm.
but it was real and the cattle did it. And we take pride in that. Not to say that there's not pride in other areas, but when you are paying a mortgage on a ranch and maybe your cattle, it gives you a real perspective on life. And if there's no other income, it's just real. That's all
Right.
I can say about it.
Well, the
It's
other
just
thing
real.
I would say to that is it's also very honest, because like when you talk about these other people who are, some people try really hard to be these advocates, and doing what I'm doing, you have to look at that and what they're doing, and how they're doing it. And one thing that's kind of disappointing is I talk a lot about ag corporations and associations, and these people want speaking gigs. That's where the big money is in this whole advocacy thing. And if you want those gigs, you can't make anybody mad. And so,
Yeah.
and I think that's where you come off like you're not afraid to say what's really going on. And you're not afraid, you're not out there worrying about who you're going to make mad if you say the wrong thing. Uh, and it really comes off with some of those people. Um, and and so that's the other reason why you've been great at what you're doing, because you're just out there, you're the real deal, and you're as honest as you can be.
Well, and I'm beholden to nobody.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's
my living doesn't depend on this. And so I'm not going to lower my standards or walk the fence to get a check for speaking somewhere. I'm just not going to do it. And because my living is in the cattle and this is our passion, and I never served my country, I'm willing to go out there and serve my country in this way, right?
yeah. And then
I'm 50 years old, and so this is how I want to do it. And I don't begrudge anybody for taking money for speaking. I think it's great. I think to monetize it is great if you're doing it for real, but you're not influenced by that. If I was to go, somebody, of course, they'd never ask me, but if I was to go speak at Texas Farm Bureau or somewhere, and they say we'll pay you $1,000, well, those policies are not what I believe in. So
Yeah.
so I would be being fork tongued in doing that, I feel like. And so I just want to keep it, I want to keep it honest and real. And I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
someday news will.
Don't want to be shady towards the people that are doing it, because I mean, there are really good people out there with good messages
There
that
are.
do the speaking stuff.
And
I think you
honestly,
said that. I don't
Jim,
want people.
well, honestly, the young ag people are really incredible because they have speaking skills and writing skills beyond what me and you have because of our generation gap. And then they have technology that they understand, and they can go do all that. But on the flip side of that, most of their education is not grassroots. It is not experience based. It is based through the agenda in the colleges and universities. And I hate to
Yeah.
say it like that, but that's what it is. And that's a problem because that's not real. That is not real production. That is agendized production.
Yeah. And I think we're getting to see more and more of the real
Yeah.
problems in those
Yeah.
areas. But also, like, yeah, you're old. That's what I mean, but that seriously though, that helps. Like, you'll see these kids on recording videos, giving advice or trying to be motivational and stuff. And I'm just like, oh man, giving business advice, there's like a 25-year-old kid trying to give business advice. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe wait 25 years or so before, and I
But the
always think about that too. When I'm doing stuff, I still feel like, well, who am I to talk about this kind of stuff? But yeah,
yeah, but
the older you
it's
get, the less that sticks with you, I guess.
well, I mean, it's pinned inside of you. Like you cannot help the passion inside of you and your
Yeah,
belief system. That is what, I mean, God put that there for a reason to be used. And you're like me. I mean, I feel like you're so talented and you have a place in this, and so do I, and so does everybody else. But we have to find that place. We have to admit, I think it's important to admit other people's strong suits.
right.
I think it's okay to be humble about admitting what you're good at. And you're a superstar at this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with all of that. It's just,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
it's-
part of that's part of the honesty thing, is like just being self-aware and being honest about it.
yeah,
Like
self-aware.
yeah. Like have been describing myself. I'm a farmer who wants to be a cowboy when he grows up,
I know, and it's
you know?
awesome because so
And
many
that's
people,
me
I
too.
know so many people identify with that. The little kid, when I think of you, I think of the little kid with the gun and the holster and the cap gun, and we're trouncing around in our little red chinks or leggings, and when we're a kid, and we have this goofy little hat. But that is what made America. Those are the dreams that we expanded westward for. And who doesn't love the mystery and of the American West? I mean, everybody wanted to be a cowboy. Why? Because it was honorable. It's honorable.
Yeah.
It's patriotic. It's manly. It's everything that we want to be deep down. And we got this woke system out here where guys don't know if they want to be guys or girls. And the truth is, those guys want to be guys. They
Right.
just feel inadequate. It's inadequacy. And it's because of something in their past. I don't know. But the truth is, everybody wants to be who God made them to be. And I don't know, me and you are kind of lucky that way.
Yeah.
So
I feel lucky all the time.
yeah, me too.
How do you think you've done in this whole media whirlwind?
Uh
You
I
ever, so like if I ever get on, a lot of times when I'm interviewed, I don't as much anymore, but I will always think, oh, I should have said that, or I should have said this.
oh
And one
yeah.
thing I want to say too is a lot of people will watch these shows and who've never been interviewed or never had a camera in their face or something like that, and they'll say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. But I don't think people realize how hard and especially those, I can't imagine how hard it is on those. What do you get? 30 seconds, a minute, and you're supposed to make
Exactly.
your
I mean,
point.
that's what I told on the Ingram angle. When I was on the Ingram angle, they hung up. We all hung up, and they texted me right back, and they said, "Shad, we loved what you said. would you come back? And I said, yeah, only if I don't have to share it with the other guy, because I want 15 more minutes to get my message out because I
Right.
needed that. And so it's going, you have to go so fast and you have to think and you're prepared, but then it's hard to organize that from top to bottom in the way that it needs presented. And then of course you forget some very important words that are in there. And thank God for you with MMRV. That has helped me a lot. Just that acronym has helped me a lot. And so you taught me that. I had never even heard of that until you found that. And so that
Yeah.
has helped bring a level of organization down because I understand it from the top down. And I
Right.
understand, where it was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I understand all that. But as they talk about, continuous improvement, they're changing it all the time. When I first started this, all of this stuff, they had identified 12 top priorities. Now it's 17 top priorities, right? So it's never changing. So to keep up with it is confusing. To relay the message in a way that people can understand it is not easy. It's hard. And you have to do it quickly and you have to do it with good enunciation, which I'm horrible at because when I
You're a lot
can't
better than I.
when I can't think, I go, and my wife's like, you sounded terrible on that. You just, that was awful. And I'm like, okay, I got to focus on not doing, again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of different levels to the
And
interviews, but overall, I've enjoyed them. I think for the time they gave me, I have done as good as I could. I'm happy with that. I do wish I could do Glenn Beck over and feel better that day. I
yeah.
didn't feel good that day. So I could feel that high again. But overall, Jim, I feel like it's been pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been great to watch. I know that.
Sure appreciate that. Thank you.
But so your last segment on Fox News was about EIDs. And so I'll give you your extra time here to talk electronic identification device. Electronic identification. Is a ear tagging cattle. And they talked about what we got going on right now is there is a rule, this USDA rule that was introduced last year. Is that right? And so it's for breeding age cattle. Do you know the month? I read 18 months. Is that right?
Yes, it's 18 months.
Hmm.
But we've been at this for several years, right? So
Yeah.
it was presented. RCAF got it stopped. Hagman got it stopped. But now, I mean, they're really coming for us.
Yeah. And so what has happened is there's in this most recent omnibus, along with 1.2 trillion dollars of money that's really just getting flushed down the toilet every way imaginable. And one of the ways is $15 million to pay for electronic identification ear tags for a rule that has not been implemented. So it's just $50 million in that bill that's apparently they're printing out now, and it's just going to sit at the USDA until they implement that rule. And then when they implement the rule, they'll be, I suppose that money just disappears instantly. It goes out to, I don't know how they'll distribute it or whatever, but all I know is I got the money, and I guess that's the important part. But like what Shad was talking about, that MMRV, and I've talked a lot about it, measure, monitor, report, and verify. And that's not the reason why you hadn't heard that before. It's not really talked about in production circles, but if you get to looking at the sustainability agendas and you look at the goals of these corporations and associations and that the goal is measure, monitor, report, and verify for all agriculture production, and all that is greenhouse gases, greenhouse gas emission, measure, monitor, report, verify. And so I think that is what EIDs are going to be used for. They're talking about traceability and disease prevention. But I think that's kind of getting a lot of people's eyes are opening to that kind of that lie that they brought all that they're pushing all this for traceability. And you talked about property rights issue when you're on Fox News, and I thought
Right.
that was great. But I also think that's definitely what it is, and it's opening people's eyes. But a lot of times I feel like people don't think when people hear property, they think land. Usually, property
Oh,
rights, land.
yeah,
But it's like if you're a cattle guy, your property is your cattle, and
absolutely.
you're losing your right to be able to raise them the way you want to.
make money. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it is. And it, property rights can extend to, extend to your land. And of course, that's the foundation of it. Because the dream was when we settled America that everybody had their piece of the pie, right? But the honest truth is property rights can extend to your bicycle, your
Right.
guns, your whatever you use to put food on your table.
Or
That's,
even anything you own, really. I mean, that's your
yeah,
property,
I mean,
and you have the
anything
right to
you,
your property. Yeah. Your
absolutely.
cars, all that.
It is inherent. Yeah. And really the RFID deal is, at the end of the day, Jim, all of this, everything we're fighting is based in freedom. It's based in liberty. And so in America, our liberty is dependent on private property. True freedom is dependent on private property and your ability to own and do what as you see fit with what you have. And so this attack, this RFID deal, it is a private property rights issue because it's an attack on your liberty. And what they'll do is, in the European Union, obviously, we see that they have used the RFID issue to seize land and reduce herd size in the name of climate change because they can do exactly what you said: measure, monitor, report, and verify. That's what it is in the EU. And so what the difference in the EU and America is we still, bear with me, we still have the right to bear arms. And I believe that is the only reason they have not implemented it up to this point, is because we have the right to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. And so they have to do it differently here. And what the RFID issue here will be, because you do have to, register your land, and then you put, I mean, at first it was just going to be breeding age cattle. Now they're talking it's going to be everything.
Yeah. That's what they were
And
pushing. And people push back on what I said about NCBA, but in their policy, it said I think they were saying every hoof is what they said, like
every
every animal by 2026. It was in that policy.
2026.
Yeah. And
So if you have that and they are able to measure, quantify everything you have, and we're adopting these sustainability model across the world. In the West, the Russians aren't adopting it. They don't give two craps about it. But we're adopting all of these policies in the West. They will go at it differently in the United States, and they will start taxing. They will use the RFID EID system to tax what they can quantify. In other words, they will tax your methane emissions because they can now quantify that. They will tax your herd number size because they can quantify that. Production variables, all quantified. And so when they can do that, when they measure that, then you will be at the subject, producers will be at the whim of a subjective third-party auditor. Their rules will change as they see fit. And that goes back to continuous improvement through the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. That's the sustainability model through and through. And so that's where they'll come in. Now, once they get past all that taxation, I believe will come the seizures, because once you tax people off the land, and they're headed for it, man. I mean, our taxes are going up every year. They lower your taxes and raise the value, right, of your land, so your taxes go up anyway. And so once they tax, and they can tax you off the land, especially through inheritance taxes, then they're able to seize that property. And then you have the public-private partnerships come in and say, let's put this heritage area over it, or let's put a conservation easement on it. Let's do something, right? And then all of a sudden, our production has gone down. Food supply chains have changed drastically. Costs have gone up for production. Costs have gone up in the store. And all of a sudden, we have a food security issue on our hands. And that's really where we're headed, as far as I'm concerned, because they know that as of right now, we could fight them. I mean, uh, I don't know that it'll come to that, but yesterday I had a reporter call me and he's like, okay, on the RFID issue, he says, you're very, very passionate about it, but why aren't more ranchers fighting it? And the honest answer is, I don't know. I don't know how an American rancher today can sit and say, I love America, I love Jesus, but let's put this RFID mandate in to monitor what the American producer is doing. It's unconstitutional. And you cannot say on one hand, I love America and what our founding fathers did in that living document called the Constitution. And on the other hand, say we want to monitor everything and we want to collect data on everything that you own. That is not freedom. They cannot be interwoven.
Yeah. And so to go back to why, I think a lot of it, you talked about Texas Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau is all in on this whole sustainability deal. National Cattlemen's Beef Association down there where you are, Texas Cattle Feeder. You get all these associations that are tied into these big corporations. The corporations are all in on the sustainability plan. They have their ESG plans, and they tell people this is how it's got to be. And I don't think people see it as clearly as a freedom issue. They're kind of like, well, Canada does it, or and as the EID tags are being used all the time. Like, what's your thoughts on EID tags just in general? Like, the problem is the mandate and the government to me,
Exactly.
the problem is the mandate, because once they can mandate the tags, they can mandate the information that they have to have on the tags, and that goes back to traceability.
Exactly. One of my dearest friends, they implemented the EID years and years ago into their herd, and it was voluntary.
Yeah.
And they did it so they could keep track of production records. And I'm all for that.
Right.
If you want to do that, that is fantastic. But if you're going to mandate, and I have a real problem with people saying it's going to bring you a premium. If everybody's mandated to do it, there is no premium in that.
Right.
I had a gal tell me that the RFID EID issue will bring us a premium. I said, if you're mandated and everybody's doing it, how is there going to be a premium to that?
Yeah, that's the opposite, because one of the biggest opponents of EID tags I know uses them in almost all his cattle. And the reason is because he has a premium. He has a program. They're programmed cattle. And and because it adds value for the beef packer to know every step of the production of those cattle. And that beef packer right now has to pay for that value. If they're mandated, that value goes away. There is no premium, because they will all carry it. But like, we have, my daughter shows cattle at the fair, and we stick EID. I mean, there's places where, and a lot of the purebred guys do it because they have to really keep track of those genetics. There's places where it makes a lot of sense.
But there's also
the problem is the mandate.
Part of being an American in a capitalistic society is that there is a place for a place to build a market everywhere, right? I mean, for me, it doesn't make sense that I would be mandated to put an EID RFID tag in cattle that I have no clue about the history on. But see, that's what they want. They want to make the industry uniform. They don't want these different market avenues, right? And I mean, I know a guy in Colorado that his whole living was made off of yearling people who at the end of the year had a certain percentage of cuts, and those cuts were unmarketable in a sale barn, and he would market them in a different way. And so there's those avenues of markets that should exist, and we should be able to create. But with this RFID EID, there's no way possible.
And what really doesn't make sense about this new rule too, and well, it makes sense if you see it the way I'm seeing it, because they want breeding aged animals. Well, what animals are more susceptible to disease, getting shipped around more, because it's interstate travel. Breeding animals, interstate travel. That's how they're really getting the toe in the door. But if you're really worried about disease traceability, like your calves are moving multiple states throughout their lifetime. But
And
our
hundreds of,
cows, yeah, and we're close to Nebraska, real close, so it would hurt us. But the majority of our cows are on our place their whole life until they go to Packer. And so the idea of breeding age animals, to me, it's like, well, they want the cow calf guys to get used to doing this. And then once they're used to putting these tags in, they're going to tag everything that hits the ground. That's the next mandate, because the
it's
guys
the,
raising the babies are the ones with breeding animals, and they're the ones that
it's
need
the
to put the tags
incremental
in.
infiltration. It's the
Right.
incremental. That's what it is. And I get tired of people comparing it to MCool. I'm like, MCool is a freedom maker.
Yeah.
RFID is a freedom taker. We have to understand the difference between a freedom maker and a freedom taker.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't, but
So if you've never bought cattle with EID tags or dealt with any of that stuff?
well, funny that you should say that, because I've been buying some older bred cows out of a sale barn here in North Texas. And I noticed 2 years ago that they had this unique system that they had just set up above the where you unload your cattle off the trailer. And I was like, that's an EID system, I'm pretty sure. Well, so I've been buying some older cows out of 3 different sale barns here. They're the only ones that have that system set up. And those cows that I'm buying out of there are coming out of there with a fresh EID tag. So they're already on board with that. So I've got a few old, like 10-year-old cows that have the EID tag. And I mean, I don't know. I'm just too old for all that stuff. And
Like I
it's
said,
not
you're
that I
old.
don't want to have a good product. I love my product. I put out as good a product as anybody does. I do a good job with our cattle. My whole family does. We grow them, and we grow them into something pretty dang awesome. We take an average calf and we put them into our system of production, and they come out an above average animal. And we have had the same buyers for 25 years. And so I know those cattle are working for them at the end of the day. I know it. And I don't know. It's a lot to think about. They are out of control. The USDA, along with other organizations, are out of control. Congress has given their rulemaking, lawmaking authority up to these organizations because they don't want to read a damn bill. And it's a bunch of crap. I mean, we
I know.
have given this power away, and this is dangerous.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like we're one of the multiple people that's just exhausted by this deal. When you think how much worse could it get, and then you see what this bill, I mean, the $15 million for ear tags isn't even half of the. I mean, we're really just funding our own invasion, is what I look at this whole bill
Oh, absolutely.
as. We're funding, bringing migrants in now that, I mean, and we've got 10 million, 8 million here
And the
within
real
3 years.
and the real number from what I hear from border patrol agents is like 22 million.
Oh, so yeah.
And it's one when you give an unelected bureaucrat access to all the money they want, that gives them a sense of power. And they take that power and it's unmitigated, and they just go crazy because these are people who have worked for people all their lives. They've never done anything productive in their life. Are they smart? Probably. Did they get a degree? Probably. Do they have any sense? No, they have no real world experience. And we're giving them this money and this power to oversee and create policies that affect us, the real producers. It makes no sense to me. It's kind of like one time my wife, she says, why are we putting all these lawyers in Congress? Congress should be full of CPAs and accountants.
Yeah.
And she's right. I mean, that's a great point.
I don't think it matters who's in there, because they had 2 days to read 1,000 pages. It didn't even matter what was in the
Exactly.
bill or who was in there. And then they just
Exactly.
vote for it. It's
No, you're right. You're right. Let's vote for it to see what's in it.
anyway.
Jeez.
Let's switch to something not so depressing, with the
Okay.
wildfires in Texas.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a bad joke. Is
Well,
that too soon?
no, it's real though. I mean, the wildfires in Texas are a tragedy, and they
Right.
are it's very sad, and people have lost a lot. They've lost a lot physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it will take years to build back, but they will build back. The producers in the panhandle are resilient. They know what 80-mile-an-hour winds are. This is not new to them. They know that they have, a lot of electricity in that country. And when you get 80-mile-an-hour spring or fall winds, you're going to have some stuff falling down, and that's not their fault. I mean, XL Energy has come out and they are at fault for this, and I hope they pay. But these ranchers, that they'll be okay. It'll take a
Yeah.
long time to get them back to where they were, and especially those starting ranchers. I've read some stories, and it's very sad. But it'll be okay. It's just a season, right? And I hope nothing. I'm not wishing. I'm not saying I have empathy for them. I do. I really
Yeah.
do.
And so
But
you
they're
went out
tough.
there, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. You put there's an article on Lonesome Lands about a family
Yeah.
that they saved their ranch house, and you told their story. Um,
Yes.
did you drive like through the middle of it? Of
Oh yeah,
where?
I drove. I mean, they took me across the whole ranch,
Yeah.
and 99.9% of that ranch burned. And I was really worried about the fences for some reason.
Right.
And I noticed, I'm like,
Because
you
you
guys,
hate building fence probably like everybody else.
oh, yeah, I have spent my life doing that. But I noticed that all of their posts were metal. And I'm like, you don't have any wood posts. And she said, they were like, no, the fire of 2017 took all of our wooden posts,
Oh,
and we replaced everything with metal posts. And I'm like, wow.
yeah.
Now they will have those. What happens in a fire like that is the heat burns the oxidation off of the barbed wire. So then the barbed wire can rust, and then
Hmm.
it falls apart a lot quicker. I mean, they've got some time, but they'll eventually have to replace bottom 2 or 3 wires and go from there. But overall, if you had wood posts, you're in trouble. And there was a
Yeah.
lot of people with a lot of wood posts.
Yeah, I drove through there in right after, I think it was 2 weeks after the 2017. I drove through where it burnt there. And it's the same spot, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Perryton. I went south out of Perryton, and saw that. And yeah, that's what I noticed too. Like the fences are just gone, and you could see
Yeah.
wire on the ground and stuff. And then a lot of those corner posts are the pipe, and that's all that would be there. But it was already turning green a little bit.
I think it is out there too. I
Yeah.
mean, right
And this
now
time of
it's,
year, it'll,
yeah.
you know, they'll have something. But I mean, so most of those cattle, do you know, like they just load them up and find someplace else to go with them?
A lot of them are, and honestly, they really need to get them all out of there so that country can heal. If the spring rains come, I think and they can get some forage production. What happened to me, this is just what I witnessed, was the crown. See, that's kind of what I call short grass country. It's in between,
Hmm.
but the crown of that grass was very damaged, and so it burned below. A lot of these places burned below the crown of that grass. And when you hurt the crown, um, you get some real damage there. And so I witnessed a lot of that. I think it'll be, blue grama, all those grasses out there are very hardy, but you got to be real careful when you damage the crown about getting it to come back. And if they get spring rains, they will. Of course, there's ranchers out there that can't afford to move the cattle, and there's not a lot of places to go. Finding a ranch to lease nowadays is next to impossible. And so some have found feed yards to go to. I know one family sent everything to Nebraska. Some have found some in Texas. They do need to get them out of there, but if they can't, they can't. And so they have to survive with what's being donated. The Esther's family or the Clark family that I interviewed, they are feeding every day. They don't have a huge cow herd, a couple hundred, maybe 250 cows. And so they're able to feed every day, and it's coming. She sent me some pictures, and it's coming back. But they need some rain. And it's March and April, and rain may come, but we know one thing for sure is the wind will come. And every minute that there's not a green blade of grass growing, that wind is continually with the dirt rolling low to the ground. Even if you can't see it, it's doing it, and it's hurting that crown. So they need to get some moisture, but hopefully it'll come and that'll change things up for them.
All right. And so I asked you the best way to donate. I guess that's how we can go out on this deal. You said Working Ranch Cowboy Association.
I think that's a great one. The Working Ranch Cowboys Association. There's a lot of them that have been set up since then. I think it's safe with the Working Ranch Cowboys Association. The Canadian Baptist Church has a good place to donate. There's a guy by the name of Ramey Keith that he has set up, done just a tremendous amount of work. And there's other people that I can't think of the names right off the top that have done a lot of work, but they're still hauling hay. I notice a lot of hay coming from the north right now on social media to help those guys. And I sent 3 loads out there, and we actually here in my little town of Olney, Texas, the tire store sent 15 fire truck tires out there, and half of them were brand new. So that was really cool. Of course, the people in the Panhandle, they're coming together to provide for their own.
Yeah.
Those are their people, and so
Yeah.
that's been awesome to see. And
Yeah.
it
And that's
just
the cool part
sometimes
about
it takes some, yeah, sometimes it takes something like this for community to come back and
right.
commune.
Yeah.
Unite.
And also I think that fire in 2017 was different. I think it was just way faster and bigger. And I think you can be kind of lucky that they didn't lose near as many houses. I don't think it was a lot bigger fire, but I don't know. I mean, there's definitely people who lost their whole place, but um, like I always think of that Hank the Cow Dog, the guy that wrote those books. He lost his house.
Yeah.
And it was a smaller fire, and and more people died. Was there many dead? I heard a couple people.
Two.
There was reported a couple deaths.
Yeah, 2 is what I heard. But here's the deal with the fires. Uh, it it could be worse, but to these families, these individual independent families, it's bad,
Yeah.
right? And so it really comes down to the community unites, but it comes down to those independent producers and what they experienced alone, and
Right.
how it'll affect their future, because they all have different. One family I know that got burned out, they're off the farm or off the ranch owners, and they have all sorts of other avenues of income. They were devastated, of course. But then on the other hand, their neighbors down the road were 2 young couples that have first time farmer loans, and they're totally broken, right? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of different dynamics out there, is what I'm saying, Jim.
Yeah, and it's one thing to remember is it's easy for if you're not there, it's easy to forget. So just
Yeah,
keep thinking about it.
that's
Because
right.
yeah, they're still feeding and they're going to be feeding for a long time.
Yes,
Where
sir.
before they wouldn't be feeding at all. So
That's
all
right.
right, I think we got plenty covered. I think we're over an hour. So Shad
That's what you
Sullivan,
want to talk
we'll
about.
be talking a lot. I think.
Well, let's get back together and talk about this sustainability model. And I have a real issue with Miles Allen, right? I
Oh,
think
do you
that's
want to talk about it? Do you want to bring
well,
that up now? This
I
could
don't
go as long as you want. I just didn't want to.
well, I know that you lose viewers if you go too long.
I don't know. I think we're doing good. I mean, I brought that up just recently, so I think it'd be a good thing to talk about
Let's
because I
talk
think
about it.
people are curious about him, and I'm curious about him too. Because so the video I just did is I just talked about I looked up his most recent work and I said the very first line of it is cattle are damaging the climate.
Yep.
And that's all I need to read. But then
Yep.
people have come back and said, well, he sticks up for cattle, and where they're coming from is he says while cattle are damaging the climate, they're not damaging it as much as fossil fuels. And that's why, that's the excuse the NCBA I'm sure has to bring him in. But a part of that too, to me, is, you're the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. You're supposed to be, you're representing American cattlemen, guys raising cattle, and you bring in a professor from Oxford University in London to come over and talk about your sustainability. I mean, it's just
Well, I mean, to go one step further, Jim, they're vegan activists, and he is the program lead at the University of Oxford Environmental Change Institute. Okay,
right.
now I mean, we know what the World Wildlife Fund and their push for sustainability said. They said cattle were killing the planet. Were killing the planet. Jason Clay said that. And so when you have organizations that claim to represent the grassroots producers say, hey, we have to sit at the table. We have to sit at the table with these people, otherwise they'll eat us. How are they going to eat us? We
Right.
own the land. People want our product. They're not going to eat us. And so to form a bond and a partnership with that is nothing more than a pay to play system. That's what it's coming. That's where it's coming from. And so in my presentation, the war on beef, years ago, I found this guy by the name of Marco Springman, Dr. Marco Springman, who did this study at Oxford University. And it was a study on red meat consumption on Americans. Now, why he's doing a study on red meat and processed meat on Americans in America is beyond me. But I went and found a little more about him, and he's a vegan activist, right? And so I'm like, well, where does this lead to? I mean, why is he doing this study on Americans and their red meat consumption? So I got to digging and find out he's a vegan activist, and he did this study that was published by the Library of Science, which is a nonprofit journal. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? So I study that a little bit. Well, the founder of that journal is the CEO and founder of Impossible Foods, Impossible Meats. His name is Patrick Brown.
Yeah.
And so I'm
And he's the
like,
guy who said, I'm pretty sure by now, I think that Impossible Foods, we were all supposed to be eating plant-based and the cattle industry
yeah, I
destroyed.
mean, and Impossible Food. I mean, they've had their problems. So we have Dr. Miles Brown, who's the program lead at Oxford University Environmental Change Institute, and his research peer, who is a known vegan activist, doing a red meat study on Americans, published by the Library of Science, which was founded by Patrick Brown, who's the CEO of Impossible Foods, and they're speaking at a grassroots Cattlemen's convention. Are you kidding me? They
Yeah.
are they are the World Wildlife Fund. They are the ones that are saying cattle are killing the climate. Why are we doing this? And furthermore, okay, I don't care who the hierarchy and the NCBA are. I don't care who they are. But why are there members who claim to love America, claim to love the beef industry, claim to love their consumer, and provide the best product in the world to our consumers? Why are we allowing that anti-meat ideology to sit in the same rooms of the people creating policy for our industry? I do not get it. I cannot get it in my mind how this is happening. The only thing I can come to a conclusion on is that the global cabal is pushing money down into the UN World Economic Forum, and then their foot soldiers are getting a portion of it, and they come down into all these organizations. That's the only thing I know. I've studied this war on beef for a long time. I feel like I'm pretty not sharp, but I kind of know it.
Right. And
But it's
yeah, well, you talk about the money pushing down, and I talk about ESG.
yeah.
But you look at the corporations. It's the corporations, and I've talked about it's the corporations that control NCBA, and the goal for NCBA is to get all their producers on board with the same,
But
the
the idea of
sustainability agenda.
the
And
this the idea of the sustainable agenda, Jim, is above these corporations. There is
yeah,
money. This is old money. This is global power filtering into these corporations to control the food supply. Because at the end of the day, the global cabal, the global cartel, they are eugenicists. They believe in the one world order. They want total control of all the land, and so they have to implement that. That comes from even above the global corporations,
right.
in my opinion.
Yeah. But that's the other thing. If you're a cattle person, you're like, well, this guy, I got people commenting on my Twitter. Well, Miles Allen has worked hard for the cattle industry. And I'm
Really?
like, well, let's just pretend that he has. But he's saying that he's all in on this net zero idea for everything. The whole world has to get to net zero or we're all going to burn up. And so from that, and he says, cattle do damage the climate. And so like he's saying there's certain things you can do to, this rotational grazing and all this, to reduce that damage that they do. But even if you're in on net zero, well, are you going to want to expand the herd? Like if cattle, do you want to expand the numbers, or do you think it would be better for the climate to reduce the numbers? I guarantee you, if you ask him that question, there's only one answer he can have.
That's right.
Because if he believes, what he's written, and that's the other thing with all these people at these universities and stuff, talking about how, well, if we do things the right way, well, what if we want to expand the herd? Because that's where my mind is. I feel like everybody should be eating more beef, and we should be increasing demand, and we should be expanding the herd. I think it'd be the best thing for everybody. And how does that fit in with a guy who's sworn allegiance to net zero? Like, he's the leader of this coalition, net zero. I don't know if it's a coalition or what they even called it, but he's all in on the net zero thing too.
It's a strange dynamic, because we know the truth is that without cattle on this planet, God created them with a ruminant stomach and cloven hooves to repair the planet. That is by his design. And so you have to look at it in a spiritual way. And I know people probably don't like that, but that's the truth. God created these things. Those people pushing this climate crisis agenda are not believers. They do not believe in a higher power.
Right.
And so this design was designed by God. And we know, without any research, we know from experience, me and you, the lowliest of the lowly, the lowest producers on earth. That's what I am. I'm a yearling man, right? But we know that with proper practices, we can actually repair our country and add more and add more.
Yeah.
Because from experience, right?
Yeah.
So the propaganda of partnering up with these people that are actually against us, that's what you have to realize. They're not for us.
And
they are against us.
If you look back on the deal too, like if you look back through the years and how this sustainability agenda has just kind of been a ball that's rolling, and I got into it with, the livestock's long shadow. That was your first.
Yeah.
The global, or this climate change agenda was nothing about cattle until 2006, and livestock's long shadow from the United Nations came out, and it's been debunked every which way possible. Just faulty research. It's all wrong, but they got it in there. And then, this push, and the whole thing about man-made climate change. Well, you're blaming it on animal. It's animal-made climate. It's so stupid, and it should have been pushed back on instantly. But instead, those same people at NCBA and the Miles Allens of the world, and they embraced it. They embraced it and said, "This is something we can use." And we didn't realize it, and I think a lot of people now, even now, are just realizing it. And I go ahead.
Well, it's because they hate freedom. They do not love freedom. They hate freedom. And I will contend always, where there is beef, there is freedom. That's the truth. And they hate it. I've got a friend in Colorado, and he's a freaking genius. I mean, he's just one of the smartest people I know. And his family they're true pioneers in the beef industry. And I mean, I won't mention their names, but they were some of the first to do some of the biggest things in terms of environment, production standards, all of this sustainability stuff. And their family kind of got caught up in this role of sustainability and conservation easements. And one of the sons was stepping back, and he's like, this seems like a lot of control, because they were going to sign all of these production standard contracts, right? And he's like, whoa, we're Americans here. Dad, I don't know what we should be doing. And so his dad says, I run this outfit. Well, I'll do what I want. And they get down and they get up to the Nature Conservancy, and they're about to sign this conservation easement between them and the Nature Conservancy. And I think they had one between them and the World Wildlife Fund or something. I don't know. But anyway, and the dad gets to this one page, and he's like, wait a minute. We didn't talk about this. They had put some stuff in there that they had no clue that they were signing. So they backed off of it. Well, this guy, he's a little older than me. He really likes technology. So he was telling me the other day, he's like, I asked Chat GPT, which is artificial intelligence. He says, I asked if cattle were really killing the climate. And so Chat GPT goes into this big spiel about how they are. And so this guy is way smarter than I am. So he just keeps asking Chat GPT AI about, he's asking these questions coming off of its own answers. And he said about 10 minutes into it, it finally said, cattle are not killing the climate. They're not caught. This is Chat GPT saying cattle are not the actual cause of climate change. It's
Right.
this, And so if you go far enough, the truth is there if we dig
Yeah.
dig deep enough, Jim.
Yeah. He should do that again in video today, but
I know. I told him that exact
because
thing.
he's
I said, I
probably
want to,
smart. I could try it, but I've never messed with any of that stuff. And
I'm
I'm
scared. I'm
against
scared to
it.
mess with it. I ain't doing it.
I know. I think that's part of our age. Like I'm
Yeah,
not messing with that AI stuff. I don't. Hopefully, I'm dead and gone before that takes over.
me too. Me too.
All
But
right, man. You think
what do
we
you
got
think?
everything? Did we hit everything?
I think so. I think it's a good conversation.
Big thanks to Shad for coming on here today and talking with me. I think me and him are going to be doing maybe some more things in the future. I'm sure I'll be doing another podcast. I'm wanting to get down to his place and do one in person where we can kind of talk more about his family and his ranch. Maybe less about the issues and more kind of about his story and how he got to where he is. And this podcast was brought to you again by lonesomelands.com. If you want to support the channel and everything we're doing here, go to Lonesome Lands, click on subscribe at the top of the page, and there's a number of different ways you can support us. Also, a merchandise page there where if you want to buy something, that helps too. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, do all that stuff. Leave a review on Apple or Spotify. That always helps. I've done pretty good on YouTube, but I'm still working on getting those things going. So thanks to everybody for watching and following along and everybody that's sharing it. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
And
Yeah.
for some reason, people understand or able to follow my dumb ass because that's why most people are dumb and so am I.